You're listening to APMG Radio. I'm Lucy, and today I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Valerie MacLeod, who is a business coach who works with technical leaders to help them fine-tune their leadership skills and make well-informed business decisions. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Lucy. Great to be back.
Now, in our last two interviews, we've discussed your article, 9 Symptoms of Highly Ineffective Leaders. As a review for people who have heard the previous two interviews and as an overview for new listeners, tell us what the 9 symptoms of highly ineffective leaders are.
Well, there's 9 symptoms, and they're the symptoms that people see, and then they often call me in to coach those people. So the first one is micromanagement, is the most popular one. I get it over and over again, where someone wants to be involved in the details. They're not stepping up to leadership and leading the entire team. The second symptom of highly ineffective leaders is wasted energy and resources. And this is where, due to lack of clear direction, people just aren't all pulling in the same direction. They're not all pulling together, and there's waste associated with that. That's the second symptom. The third symptom is analysis paralysis, where a leader actually gets frozen. They can't make decisions. There's just too much for them, too much information for them. The fourth symptom of highly ineffective leaders is cookie-cutter feedback. This is where the leader gives everyone the same amount of information. Instead, leaders need to understand that individuals have different needs at different times in their career and different times in their tenure in the group as well, on how much information they need and how much background. The fifth symptom of highly ineffective leaders is conflict aversion. It takes a lot of skill to handle conflict in a constructive way, so people tend to ignore that one. The sixth symptom is gratuitous turnover. So employees are leaving a leader because of that person's style or behavior. The seventh symptom of highly ineffective leaders is unresolved customer and employee complaints. People get busy and they use that as an excuse for not dealing with one complaint or the second one and the third one, instead of dealing with them before they grow and become too big. Mm-hmm. The eighth symptom of highly ineffective leaders is staff burnout. I call this when people get crispy around the edges, where people are just working hard and they can't sustain that over long periods of time. So then they get tired, they make errors, there's extra rework, and there could be health issues as well. And the last symptom of highly ineffective leaders is missed targets. So we know that every group has financial targets, operational targets, and so leaders need to work with their staff to make sure that people understand what those targets are, how to get to those targets, and leaders have to make sure there's no barriers in the way or anything else that comes in the way to stop people from moving productively towards all of those targets.
Excellent. And listeners, if you didn't manage to catch those first two shows, you can go and listen to them back. And we did go and break down each point and what it truly meant. What inspired you to write this article, Valerie?
I really enjoyed coaching. I've been coaching for quite a few years and just saw patterns happening in the coaching. And I thought it would be helpful for leaders and for human resources people to know if they're seeing something happening, oh, right, I could call Val in and she could coach the person on that.
Excellent. And are there different techniques that you use to address the different sort of ineffective symptoms that you see within leaders?
Well, every situation's different. So, the fourth symptom of a highly ineffective leader is cookie-cutter feedback. So if I did cookie-cutter coaching, then I would be a highly ineffective coach. So it's always different. I always bring in some tools, and I'm always prepared for wherever the person wants to go. So it's really wherever the person leads it at that time, what we end up discussing and the issue we end up spending time on.
Well, Valerie, you're a business coach. Tell us again what a business coach actually is.
Well, a business coach helps leaders on the business of that organization. So the organization doesn't have to be a business. It doesn't have to be a money-making enterprise. It could be private organization, a for-profit, a not-for-profit, public, whatever. But every organization is put together to achieve some kind of result. So I help leaders be more effective moving towards those results. I help them fine-tune their skills.
And do you think sometimes it's hard for leaders to accept that criticism, because typically they are the ones who are, coaching or at least demonstrating what they would like to take place within their own organization? How do they typically feel when you come in, Valerie, and say, okay, so this is what's happening and this is how you need to change? How do you go about it so that they don't take as much criticism and they're actually able to work with you?
Well, I work with people, two different kinds of people. One actually want a coach and know that they need to just turn up the dial a little bit on their skills, and they're the ones that are very open, very easy to work with. The people who are told you have to get a coach or else, those are the ones I have to spend a little bit more time up front with, talking about how we're going to work together, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, what I'm going to tell the boss, what I'm not going to tell the boss. And I don't come in telling them things. I may recommend some things, but I often bring in things so they can find their own perspective and find their own answers.
You talk about leaders. Do all of your clients have staff reporting to them?
That's a great question. I usually work with people who have staff reporting to them, but I actually do work with individual contributors as well. These are people who don't have staff that report to them, but they do lead in the organization. These individual contributors may lead projects. They may facilitate decision-making, have impact on decision-making. In fact, true leadership is defined as inspiring others to do what you want them to do. So I think people who don't have people reporting to them have to have better leadership skills to inspire those people to want to do something that I may want them to do. So I talk about this as the difference between uppercase L leadership and lowercase L leadership. Uppercase L leadership is somebody who has staff reporting to them and their title's manager or CEO or director, whatever. That's leadership with a capital L. It's pretty easy to see on a org chart that they have staff reporting to them. But there's lots of people who don't have staff who are still leaders in a lowercase L kind of way and leading within the organization, influencing others inside the organization.
Now, I've noticed, Valerie, that business coaching has become, especially doing these radio shows, and I speak to leaders who have had business coaches or other sort of coaches that work within the corporate field. Why do you think business coaches have become popular?
Well, I think it's really lonely at the top. And there isn't often a person who will come in and you can confidentially discuss ideas with them, who will give you suggestions, who will ask questions, and have no vested interest in whether you choose A or B. So it's somebody who has the skills of leading a leader to the right answers, and yet whatever they choose is good with me, because I'm not going to lose my job, because as a coach, I'm an external.
What do you think makes a good business coach?
I think it's a person who has a really broad perspective, a person who understands business, who understands coaching, who understands sort of the big areas that I deal with, which is communication and managing conflict and implementing strategy, those big pieces. So having a really broad perspective as a coach and knowing all the different pieces and pulling those all together.